Hello and welcome to another edition of Small Cap Power Discussion. I'm your host, Jim Gordon, and joining us today is President Mike Sieb of Getchell Gold Corporation. Mike, great to have you with us.
Great to be here.
Glad to have you, pal. Lots to talk about today. Let's start with kind of an overview of Getchell. You bring over 30 years experience in this business to the table. Talk a bit about how Getchell and you come together and then we'll get into some specifics after that.
Well, I joined Getchell about 2 years ago initially as a director. And I wasn't aware of Getchell prior to that, but one of my good friends who is, I do have to definitely give him credit, he's a fairly wily and intelligent individual. He said, Mike, I want to introduce you to this company. And he goes, they need a little bit of help. They're kind of moving along really nicely, and they're building something up really good, but they kind of need a little bit of stick handling, as you would say. From the technical side as well as from the capital market side. And with my 30 years of experience, I've been on both sides of the fence, kind of moving well and strongly forward on both fronts. And when I took a look at Getchell, I said, like these guys are kind of really have something, and I know where they can take it. And then just last year, I took over the presidency. So I'm kind of really now kind of stewarding my own position.
Before we talk about results, let's give our viewers out there a bit of background on Fondaway Canyon.
Fondaway Canyon is the flagship project for Getchell Gold Corp. And by all stretches of the imagination, it is the classic definition of a flagship project. When the project was acquired, it came with a fairly sizable historic resource. And we're talking approximately 400,000 ounces in the indicated category and 600,000 ounces in the inferred. So, I mean, starting off with a foundation of 1 million ounces combined, that's extremely significant. And it's not just the number that's important, it's everything else, the entire package that comes with it. It's located in Nevada. And if anybody knows that Nevada is kind of the reigning central kingdom of gold production, approximately 23 gold mines are currently in production in Nevada. And it continuously ranks as one of the top 4 or 5 mining jurisdictions in the world. And this is comparing just a state, to major countries on the world stage. It comes in 4th behind China, Australia, and Russia. So that kind of gives it a good perspective of kind of where Nevada places. So as you can kind of see on the map, the location is wonderful. From Reno, just to get to the drill site, it's less than 2-hour drive. There's a lot of resources available there. There's a lot of incentives that are incorporated within the state of Nevada, their mining sector. So it's a great place to work.
You guys have had a busy 2021. Can you talk about the results you released in early 2021?
Yes, Getchell Gold completed a 6-hole drill program at Fondaway Canyon in the fall of 2020. And we released the results in 2 batches in January and February. And they just kept getting better. It's not very often where kind of all the drill holes in your target zone all return either results as anticipated or better than anticipated. So it's kind of kudos to our technical team, and it's kudos to the project as a whole, because the results that we're talking about are actually fairly spectacular. One thing I want to specifically highlight is the drill results on 2 sections that we drilled. One is the northeast southwest Colorado to Packrat gold trend, and this is one of these sort of major gold trends on Fondaway Canyon. We drilled 4 holes on this section, and all 4 holes intersected broad zones of mineralization. And when I say broad zones, I mean greater than 100-meter thick zones of mineralization. And the results, the mineralization starts at surface, and combining the length of those 4 drill holes, you're talking about a 500-meter downward continuation of a 100-meter thick zone of mineralization, with the last hole ending with 1.8 grams over 90 meters. I mean that's a very significant intersection. And so that's a real success for the 2020 drill program, is that we actually showed the continuity of the mineralization. And even better than that, it's looking stronger at depth. It's open both laterally and down dip. And if you look on the section that's on the screen, you can see about 300 meters farther to the west or the left of the slide, a hole FC 1701. This was a drill hole that was drilled in 2017 that intersected a significant zone of mineralization, and that drill hole ended in mineralization. So now if you start connecting the dots, you're looking at this really substantial, broad and thick zone of mineralization that potentially goes from surface and is shown to continue through 1701 for about an 800-meter extent, and it's still open. And this is not the only section that is that positive. If you go about 300 meters to the southeast and look at a parallel section, and that's sort of the half moon to south pit long section, it shows the exact same characteristics. Hole 2004 was a 500-meter long hole, which ended, it's still fairly, relatively close to surface at about 250 meters below surface. But of that 500-meter length, approximately 50% of that drill hole was in the target gold mineralization zone. And so, when you think about that, that's a 500-meter long drill hole, and 50% of it was in mineralization. It ended in mineralization, a very kind of 100-meter thick band, just kind of as represented in everything else that we've drilled to date. And it's also open laterally and down dip as well. So when you start putting the pieces together, you're starting to not just start off with a very kind of constrained zone of mineralization. You're really showing like 100 meters thick and long and broad zone of mineralization that we're going to be developing over the next year. And when you start to take this to the market, I think the market is really going to kind of appreciate the results that we've shown, as well as the activity and the results that we're going to be doing through 2021. The purpose of the drill program was kind of threefold. It was one, to sort of characterize the mineralization that was known. So we're kind of talking about the historic resource to kind of get an understanding of the mineralization and the mineralizing system. But it was also to extend the mineralization and show the potential continuity of the zones of mineralization. And the drill results came back and they basically checked all those three boxes.
We're talking with Mike Sieb, he's the president of Getchell Gold Corporation. More information, it's getchellgold.com. We should also mention, if you want to email them, personal touch, you can do so at info@getchellgold.com or justin@getchellgold.com. Mike, a lot of data points from just 5 holes. If you're going to summarize the results from this drill program, what would you consider to be the biggest highlights? And I say highlights as in plural.
Thanks, and that's actually quite accurate. There's quite a number of major benefits that the Fondaway Canyon Gold Project kind of brings to the table. One is the mineralization starts at surface. And so that's not too many projects can actually just say that. And so that actually provides a kind of a very strong potential sort of economic benefit down the road, having the mineralization start at surface. Two, I mean, it did come with extremely sizable historic resource to start from. And the Fondaway Canyon is very sort of classic Nevada, but it brings an extra component to the table. It has actually a very, very broad lower grade gold halo that would normally be kind of incorporated within a resource and a potential mine model. And that's really sort of like the foundation of any development that you see in Nevada. But the additional component that Fondaway Canyon adds to the story is that there are actually some very significant high grade conduits. And these aren't like narrow zones of gold. I mean, there are intersections of, like 20 meters wide of fairly kind of significant kind of high grade gold. So when you're looking at Fondaway Canyon and you kind of see the breadth of the mineralization, and just the one zone that we're focusing on now is about 800 meters by 800 meters, and we're starting to trace the gold for almost the entire extent of that window. It starts to really put things in perspective of where you've started from and actually where you can take the project. So when you combine all those things, and again, this is just one small area that we're kind of starting to look at, it really represents a very potential sizable mineralizing system that we're only starting to develop.
Uh, Talk a bit about what it would take to have the numbers increase. You mentioned significant resource estimate of approximately 1 million ounces at Fondaway Canyon. Can you give us a sense, based on your experience and your knowledge of what it would take, as I mentioned, to have those numbers increase?
Yeah, to kind of put it in perspective, it is a sizable historic resource, but it was actually the modeling of it was extremely constrained. It was modeled as if it would be an underground operation. So the cutoff gold grade was a lot higher than you would look at. It was 3.43 grams per ton gold. So if anybody is familiar with, like starting to assess and design something here, you know that that's an extremely constrained and limiting factor that is not actually represented here in the real world. So with the drilling that we've accomplished in our 5 drill holes, I mean, one of the last drill holes hit 1.8 grams gold over 90 meters. And that's, if you map it out from surface, that's an extent of a 500-meter down dip extent of mineralization at that grade. Extremely substantial. And there are indications that it's completely open, both laterally and down dip. And then there's intersections that are about even 300 meters farther distant that completely line up on the projection plane. So you're starting off with an extremely kind of constrained historic resource. But when you start adding like 500 meters of 100-meter thick bands of mineralization, I mean, you can get places quick.
Sticking with those results, Mike, what can investors expect from Getchell Gold throughout the rest of 2021?
Well, we're in an extremely good place right now. We have approximately $1.5 to $1.6 million in our bank account. We have a substantial number of warrants that are in the money. So we're looking for a kind of a funding stream over the next year to 2 years of about $3 to $3.5 million just from conversion of warrants. In addition to that, I mean, with the current strength in the gold market and the gold sector, and what we're actually starting to show to the market here with Fondaway Canyon, we're going to increase the money in our bank account through a raise. That is then going to really kind of put us in a very strong footing to be actually one of the most aggressive exploration companies in the region, and not only for this year, but for the next couple of years.
Mike, last word, of course, goes to you. Let's talk a bit about last thoughts on what's going on with you guys, Getchell, and especially for those viewers out there that may want to know more.
Well, Getchell is a well-known name in Nevada. I think it's going to actually be more well-known through us. And you're looking at kind of a junior mining company that has just kind of come onto the stage here in just the last few months. And you can see kind of how strong our presence is starting to be. And I expect that our presence is going to be even stronger moving forward. So Getchell Gold Corp is definitely one of the sort of Nevada junior mining companies to put on your radar.
And Mike, we should mention too, is Getchell Gold will be hosting a live webinar in March.
Yes, we will. And we have hosted certain webinars announcing and definitely detailing the results of our recent drill program. So if anybody is interested, those webinars are available, and I do recommend watching the most recent ones because it is a good comprehensive view of what we have.
Yeah, and I would also mention, folks, check out getchellgold.com, a very well put together website. As we mentioned earlier, too, if you have any questions, it's info@getchellgold.com. You can also go to justin@getchellgold.com. And don't forget, as we mentioned, Mike just said, they'll be hosting a live webinar in March. It's Mike Sieb, president of Getchell Gold Corporation. Mike, thank you for joining us today.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Ours too. Thank you very much. And we should also tell you smallcappower.com. Don't forget to check out our videos on YouTube. Like, share if you could. We would appreciate it. I'm Jim Gordon, and thank you for watching. It's been another edition of Small Cap Power Discussions.